Something inside 3I ATL Atlas has stopped behaving like a natural object. It feels awake. Every telescope shows the same impossible truth. Beneath the ice lies a structure too precise, too geometric to be nature's work. And at 3:47 a.m. tonight, it did the unthinkable. Atlas suddenly accelerated. Not from sunlight, not from gravity, but as if it were responding. If you're thinking that sounds like deliberate maneuvering, you're not alone. Stay with me. It gets worse from here. I don't remember the exact moment my hands started shaking, but I remember the screen, the frozen frame, the number that shouldn't exist. A spike in velocity so sharp, so clean, so violently unambiguous that for several seconds I thought I was looking at a glitch. Not data, not reality. Objects don't do that. Not comets, not natural bodies, not anything that obeys the physics I grew up believing in. And 3I ATL Atlas, this quiet, half-forgotten interstellar orphan slipping out of our system, had just doubled its speed in under 9 minutes. Doubled. There was no outgassing spike, no fragmentation jet, no solar wind anomaly, just a smooth, cold, upward curve on a graph that I swear to you looked like someone had reached into orbital mechanics and pressed fast forward. I didn't breathe for, I don't know, a full minute? More? Let me be clear. If you're imagining some cinematic explosion of ice and dust, that's not what this is. This wasn't a burst. It wasn't chaos. It was intentional looking, deliberate looking. That curve had a personality, a signature, like acceleration that ramps up, not explodes. And if that already sounds wrong, hold on to your chest, because I haven't even gotten to the part that made NASA lock down half the servers in the Center for Near-Earth Object Studies. The new trajectory, the one computed after the spike, didn't send 3I ATL Atlas deeper into interstellar space like a normal outbound visitor. No, it bent. It curved. And for the first time since we discovered it, the object wasn't leaving. It was aiming. Straight for Venus. And if it stayed on that path, if the numbers didn't glitch, if the spike wasn't some sensor artifact, then in 51 days, an object the size of a small mountain with a velocity profile no comet in history had ever displayed would intersect Venus at an angle and speed that would deliver an energy release equivalent to roughly 30 trillion megatons of TNT. That's extinction level for a planet. Not a dent, not a crater, total erasure. Now, before we move any further, before we touch the word everyone in the lab was quietly, silently avoiding, listen to me. I didn't set out to make this story dramatic. I'm not here to sensationalize data. I'm a scientist. I'm a person who believes in equations, not omens. But when physics folds around you like wet paper, drama is all that's left. So stay with me, because by the time we get through this first night, just the first night, you're going to understand why I slammed the emergency alert, why the Jet Propulsion Lab went into silent lockdown, and why, when I finally dared to speak to my colleague in Pasadena, his first words were, "Jesus Christ, tell me this isn't real." I told him the truth. I think Venus is about to be erased. The official line was that 3I ATL Atlas had been fading, that it was fragmenting into a loose, harmless cloud of rubble drifting back into the void. Most telescopes had stopped tracking it. Funding had evaporated. The comet was yesterday's headline, overshadowed by the new exoplanet surveys and the Mars dust storms. Except for a handful of us. insomniacs, obsessives, people who couldn't leave a mystery alone even after the grant money drying up. I had been tracking Atlas every night for 9 months. Every damn night. Mostly it was monotony, pixel noise, tiny dust signatures, brightness curves barely above the threshold. But that night, I was alone in the lab. It was 3:47 a.m. The building was dead quiet except for the hum of cooling fans and the faint rattle of the vending machine in the hallway. I had a lukewarm coffee next to me I'd forgotten to drink. My eyes were burning, my neck was stiff, and then the numbers changed. Not a jump, not a discontinuity, a bend. Like a living thing waking up. First derivative climbing, second derivative steady and positive. Acceleration. Real acceleration. I remember whispering to myself, because the silence was so dense it felt illegal to talk normally. No, that's impossible. I refreshed the feed, rebooted the pipeline, reran the calibration. Same result. My stomach dropped in a way I haven't felt since childhood. The moment on the roller coaster where the car tips over the first drop and every cell in your body realizes there's no going back. Objects don't choose to accelerate. Except this one had. The first person I called was Dr. Ryan Caldwell from Caltech. The kind of person who could tell me if I'd lost my mind. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice groggy, confused. I told him to get out of bed. He told me what time it was. I told him 3i ATL Atlas had just broken conservation of momentum. The pause on the line lasted so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, send the frame packet. Now. I did. He didn't speak for almost a full minute. I could hear him breathing, hear sheets rustling, hear the frantic tapping of keys as he ran the numbers through his own software. When he spoke again, his voice was flat, stripped of all sleep. That's not thrust. I know. That's guidance. My throat closed. Jesus Christ. Stay where you are. I'm getting dressed. We're calling the director. And that was it. The moment the world changed. Because there's something you need to understand about orbital mechanics. Even when a comet outgasses, violently, chaotically, unpredictably, it does not produce clean curvature of velocity. Not like this, not that smooth, not that precise. If you saw a car on a frozen lake suddenly accelerate in a straight line with no tire friction, no visible engine, no exhaust, and no noise, you wouldn't call that natural. You wouldn't call this natural either. But the real horror wasn't the acceleration. It was the trajectory update that followed. Caldwell arrived 24 minutes later, out of breath, hair still wet, carrying a backpack that was definitely not packed in a calm state of mind. He didn't bother with greetings. He slid into the chair next to me, pulled the keyboard toward him, and ran a full orbital solve. New arc, new propagation, new path. We watched the model render on the screen like a slow-motion disaster. The curve tightened, then bent inward, then crossed the orbital plane. Venus. The simulation bloom was red. Impact probability, 74%. The room felt colder. Or maybe that was just my body recognizing danger on an evolutionary level. A threat you can't fight. A threat you can't hide from. A threat so big the brain doesn't know where to file it. We swallowed hard. Run it again. We did. Same result. A third time. Same. A fourth, this time with new instrument drift corrections. Still the same. Okay. But his voice was shaking. Okay. Okay. He pushed away from the desk and pressed both palms to his face. His breathing was tight and shallow. Not drifting, not reacting, adjusting, like a hunter, like a test, like someone, somewhere, had set a target. I felt my throat tighten. "Sir," Caldwell said quietly, "we need to inform the Planetary Defense Coordination Office." "No," the director said immediately. "Not yet." "Not yet?" I snapped. "If that thing hits Venus?" He cut me off sharply. "We don't know what it is. We don't know if the trajectory holds, and until we know, we don't start a panic we can't control." Then he looked at me, directly, the way someone looks when they already know the answer, but desperately hope you'll say something different. Could this be an artifact? I wanted to tell him yes. I wanted to give him that out. I wanted to say the calibration was off, or the frame stacking was contaminated, or the reference stars were misaligned. But I couldn't. The data was clean. Too clean. I forced my voice steady. "No, sir. This is real." He didn't blink for several seconds. Then, "Lock this line, lock this building, and nobody goes home." The next hour felt like a Cold War bunker scene. Doors locking, monitors flashing, the hum of servers ramping up as the system ingested every telescope feed we could pull from Maui, Arizona, Chile. We watched ATLS like surgeons watching a dying patient, except the patient wasn't dying. It was accelerating. The velocity curve kept climbing, slowly now, subtly, but undeniably. And at 5:12 a.m., the object did something that, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would have called impossible. It reoriented, not tumbling, not wobbling, a controlled rotation, a pivot. "Natural bodies don't pivot," Caldwell whispered wholly, but never finished the sentence. I felt my pulse in my teeth. Because the rotation wasn't random, it wasn't chaotic, it was aimed. Aimed at the Sun-Venus barycenter, like aligning a shot. That was the moment the room stopped pretending this was normal. That was the moment we stopped telling ourselves stories about outgassing. That was the moment something ancient and primal awoke inside us. Fear. Not of impact, not of danger. Fear of implication. Fear of meaning. At 5:39 a.m., the director sent the message none of us wanted to hear. Prepare for Contingency Protocol 3. I'd only heard that term once, in simulation. It's the protocol used when an object displays signatures inconsistent with natural astrophysical behavior. In plain language, when something in space behaves in a way that suggests intention.
We weren't allowed to say the other word. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the silence in the room was heavy with it. And then the seismic moment arrived. The moment that transformed a terrifying night into a planetary emergency. New model, new probability. Impact likelihood 92%. Venus wasn't just in danger, it was the target. And Atlas, the fragmented wanderer from another star, was no longer drifting. It was accelerating toward it. Like a weapon, or a message, or something much, much worse.
I thought the worst part of that night was the spike. That was wrong. The worst part was everything that came after, when the numbers stopped being numbers and started becoming implications. Because once you see intention in something that shouldn't have intention, your brain claws for explanations like a drowning man claws for air. And reality doesn't care if you're drowning. The reality was this. For the first time in recorded history, a foreign object inside our solar system wasn't leaving. It was aiming toward a planet, toward Venus. And our models said the window for intervention, the window to stop whatever was happening, was closing faster than our minds could process it. When the director called for Contingency Protocol 3, every screen in the lab shifted into a red-bordered interface I'd only ever seen twice, once during training and once during a near-miss false alarm 2 years earlier. The air changed. People changed. No one spoke above a rough whisper. Even the computers felt like they were humming quieter, as if the building understood the weight of what we were doing. Caldwell leaned toward me. We need more data. We need confirmation. Independent confirmation. He was right. We needed a second sight line, someone outside our pipeline, outside our biases, outside of the fear curling in our stomachs like a living thing. So I called the only person I trusted with the truth, Dr. Emily Reese. Emily works at the Keck Observatory in Hawaii. She's the kind of scientist whose brain runs circles around equations I still have to pause to interpret. She's also someone who doesn't panic, ever. I've seen her lose millions of dollars worth of telescope time to a hurricane and still calmly troubleshoot image sets with a flashlight between her teeth. At 6:02 a.m. Eastern, I hit call. She picked up on the second ring, sounding awake. Typical Emily. You're calling early. What's wrong? My throat felt dry. I need Keck online. Now. You need to track an object for me. What kind of object? I closed my eyes. 3I ATLAS. A beat of silence. That thing. It should be too faint by now. It accelerated, I said. The silence stretched. Accelerated how? Deliberately. There was a long exhale on the other end. Slow, controlled, but unmistakably frightened. All right. I'm opening the dome. I thought the worst part of that night was the spike. I was wrong. The worst part was everything that came after, when the numbers stopped being numbers and started becoming implications. Because once you see intention in something that shouldn't have intention, your brain claws for explanations like a drowning man claws for air. And reality doesn't care if you're drowning. The reality was this. For the first time in recorded history, a foreign object inside our solar system wasn't leaving. It was aiming toward a planet, toward Venus. And our models said the window for intervention, the window to stop whatever was happening, was closing faster than our minds could process it.
When the director called for Contingency Protocol 3, every screen in the lab shifted into a red-bordered interface I'd only ever seen twice, once during training and once during a near-miss false alarm 2 years earlier. The air changed. People changed. No one spoke above a rough whisper. Even the computers felt like they were humming quieter, as if the building understood the weight of what we were doing. Caldwell leaned toward me. "We need more data. We need confirmation, independent confirmation." He was right. We needed a second sightline, someone outside our pipeline, outside our biases, outside of the fear curling in our stomachs like a living thing. So, I called the only person I trusted with the truth, Dr. Emily Reese. Emily works at the Keck Observatory in Hawaii. She's the kind of scientist whose brain runs circles around equations I still have to pause to interpret. She's also someone who doesn't panic, ever. I've seen her lose millions of dollars worth of telescope time to a hurricane and still calmly troubleshoot image sets with a flashlight between her teeth. At 6:02 a.m. Eastern, I hit call. She picked up on the second ring, sounding awake. Typical Emily. "You're calling early. What's wrong?" My throat felt dry. "I need Keck online, now. You need to track an object for me." "What kind of object?" I closed my eyes. 3I ATLS. A beat of silence. "That thing? It should be too faint by now." I said, "It accelerated." The silence stretched. "Accelerated how?" I said, deliberately. There was a long exhale on the other end, slow, controlled, but unmistakably frightened. "All right," she said, "I'm opening the dome." Keck locked on to Atlas at 6:14 a.m. The lag between Hawaii and our lab was only a few seconds, but those seconds stretched into something that felt geological. Then the confirm packet arrived, raw, untouched, perfect. And there it was. The acceleration, the rotation, the sickening, precise curvature in the outbound arc. It was all there. Emily breathed out through her teeth. "Oh my God." I said, "You see it?" Though I already knew the answer. "Yes," she whispered. "It's not a comet anymore." Her voice had this hollow, suspended quality, like she was watching something so far beyond normal that her mind hadn't caught up yet. Then she said something I will never forget. "It's compensating for drift." I asked, "What drift?" She zoomed in, highlighted 3 faint dust plumes, barely visible even using Keck's adaptive optics. "These," she said, "tiny fragments breaking away. The mass distribution changes. Natural bodies wobble. But Atlas, it's correcting." I swallowed hard. "You're saying it's—" "Yes," she said. "It's steering." The word landed like a weight on my chest. Steering. Not tumbling, not drifting, not being pushed by solar wind or sublimation. Steering. "A natural object can't do that," Caldwell muttered behind me. His voice was hoarse, like he'd aged 10 years in an hour. Emily heard him. "No natural object can," she said. Then, "What do you think it is?" And there it was. The question we'd all been circling, scared to touch. What do you think it is? What do you think it is? But I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth isn't something you speak lightly. Not when speaking it out loud makes it real. So I said nothing, and the silence said everything. At 6:46 a.m., the first federal call came in. The Department of Defense. Secure line, two-star general, voice like concrete. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask who we were. He asked one thing. Is Venus at risk? The director answered. Yes. Is Earth at risk? No, not directly. Directly? The director paused. If Venus destabilizes, the debris field could... We'll model the debris, the general said. Your job is to tell us if this is an attack. Attack. The first time I heard the word spoken aloud, it felt like someone shoved ice water down my spine. Sir, Caldwell said carefully, we're not saying that. The general shot back. You implied control. Control implies design. Design implies origin. So I'll ask again, is this an attack? The room felt too small, too bright, too claustrophobic. And then the director gave the only scientifically honest answer. We don't know. The general didn't miss a beat. Find out. The line went dead. The next 2 hours were the purest form of controlled panic I've ever lived through. Screens filled with simulation cones, impact energies, atmospheric models, tidal disruption projections. Caldwell slammed coffee he didn't taste. I ran cross-correlation checks like my life depended on it. The director paced in tight, angry circles, muttering to himself under his breath. At 7:18 a.m., Emily sent new telemetry. Atlas had accelerated again. Not as dramatically as before, but enough to confirm something terrifying. The acceleration wasn't a one-time event. It was a sequence, a pattern, a series. Caldwell zoomed in on the curve, his voice shaking with a mix of awe and dread. It's pacing, like it's calibrating. I asked, calibrating for what? He didn't look at me. For the collision. I need to explain something before we go any further, because this is where everything you think you know about orbital mechanics gets ripped apart and rearranged. Natural objects do not optimize their approach. Natural impacts are messy, chaotic. They oscillate, they drift, they precess. This one didn't. It was narrowing, sharpening, tightening the impact vector with every micro-adjustment, as if Venus were a bullseye, as if the object were, well, guided. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat as I watched the numbers resolve. There was this slow, creeping certainty building in me, like watching the silhouette of a predator emerge from fog. Caldwell rubbed both hands over his face. Okay, he said hollow. We need to discuss the possibility that someone... The director cut him off, sharply. No, not unless we eliminate every natural explanation first. But even he didn't sound convinced. At 8:03 a.m., we caught the first real anomaly. Not the acceleration, not the path correction, not the unnatural rotation. A shadow. Emily found it. A drop in luminosity inside the coma, too geometric, too stable, too persistent to be dust. She sent the frame over, and when it rendered on our screens, the room collectively inhaled. It wasn't rock. It wasn't ice. It wasn't fragment debris. It was a shape. Angular, symmetrical, defined, buried under kilometers of ice and dust. I zoomed in until the pixels began to break apart, but the silhouette held. A silhouette of something not random. Caldwell whispered, "Oh, hell, that's manufactured." "Stop," the director said, but it wasn't a correction.
It was pleading.
And now that target was a planet in our neighborhood, a planet close enough to see with the naked eye. At 9:12 a.m., the White House made contact, not through an aide, not through an intermediary, through the president. Her voice came through shaky but controlled, like someone trying very, very hard not to show fear. "I need the truth," she said. "Is Venus in danger?" The director answered, "Yes." "And Earth?" "Potentially." That word hung in the air like a blade. "Explain," she said. The director nodded at me. I swallowed hard and stepped forward. "If the impact occurs as projected, Venus will undergo complete atmospheric loss. The mantle may partially liquefy. Debris from the strike could destabilize orbital resonances over the next several years. Earth's orbit isn't directly threatened, but gravitational cascade effects—" "In plain English," she said. I hesitated. "Earth could be hit. Not immediately, but eventually." There was silence on the line. Long. Cold. Final. Then the president asked the question no scientist ever wants to hear. How do we stop it? This is the moment, right here, where everything inside me cracked. Because you'd think there's a plan for something like this. A system, a protocol, a defense mechanism? But there isn't. Our planetary defense strategies were built around rocks, accidental threats, dumb masses of stone and ice following predictable laws. Not this. Not a guided object. Not an accelerating object. Not an object that seemed to wake up. "We can't intercept it," Caldwell said softly. "It's too fast." I added, "We can't deflect it. The delta V required is impossible with current technology." The director said, "We have no weapon capable of delivering that kind of energy at that distance." And then silence. The most suffocating silence I've ever felt. The president breathed in slowly. "Then tell me what we can do." The director didn't sugarcoat it. "Pray the object changes course." But fate, or whatever guides physics when physics stops behaving, wasn't interested in mercy. At 10:02 a.m., we received the most devastating update yet. Emily's newest packet. Fresh images, clearer resolution, higher contrast. And there it was. Something inside the ice, expanding, heating, growing brighter. Like a system powering up, like something preparing for impact, or activation, or both. My vision tunneled as the data poured in. "Oh God," Caldwell whispered. "It's charging." The director slammed his hand on the desk. "Charging for what?" I didn't answer. Because the only answer that made sense was one nobody in that room wanted to speak. Not out loud. Not yet. Not while we still had hope the universe was something simpler than this. The final twist of the morning came at 10:27 a.m. It started with a noise, one of the computers emitting a sharp panic chime. Caldwell whipped around to look at the screen, then froze. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't move. So I stepped beside him, looked, and felt every muscle in my body go ice cold. Atlas wasn't just accelerating. It had just scanned something. A directional burst, focused, narrow, high frequency, not noise, not radiation. Information. A signal. Sent outward. Not toward Venus. Toward us. Aimed directly at Earth.
The moment the signal appeared, the room went silent in a way I've never heard silence before. Not the quiet of concentration, not the quiet of fear. This was the quiet of people who suddenly realized the universe might be looking back. The waveform on the screen was tight, narrow, and unnervingly symmetrical. Not noise, not background radiation, not the chaotic hiss of cosmic dust. It was structured. I felt every hair on my arms rise as the system auto-labeled the detection. Anomalous directional broadcast. Source, 3I Atlas. Target vector, Earth. Direct, aimed, purposeful. Caldwell leaned closer to the monitor, his breath fogging the glass. Oh my God, it's not random. He didn't need to say more. It was obvious. The signal had a pulse structure, like a heartbeat in math. Not a steady drone, not a simple sine wave. Sequential clusters, repeating spacing. Information density that didn't match any known natural emission profile. I swallowed hard. Try decomposing it, I said. He hesitated. If it's a message, then we need to know, or at least understand what level of complexity we're dealing with. Emily's voice cracked through the speaker from Hawaii. I'm seeing it too. Same amplitude, same direction. It's targeting Earth. Her tone had shifted now. Less analytical, more fragile. Like she was losing the insulation between science and fear. I closed my eyes for half a second. I think Atlas just contacted us. Those words tasted metallic in my mouth. The decoding attempt was chaos wrapped in discipline, which is the only way science ever responds to fear. Caldwell ran a Fourier transform, nothing familiar. I ran a time domain analysis, no match with pulsars, magnetars, or background microwave patterns. Emily tried frequency stacking. Still nothing. The director paced, gripping his jaw with one hand, as if the act of holding himself physically together might keep the situation from collapsing. Is it communication? He asked. I don't know, but it's certainly not geological or thermal or random. Caldwell snapped his fingers. Run an autocorrelation. When the result popped up, my stomach flipped. The pattern didn't just correlate with itself. It aligned with 3 distinct peaks. It's segmented, Caldwell whispered. Like chapters. Or packets, Emily added. The director froze mid-step. Is it transmitting data? I'm telling you, Caldwell said softly, that I've never seen a natural astrophysical process do this. There it was. The moment the line crossed, the moment science stepped from uncertainty into something like recognition. We weren't analyzing a comet. We were listening to a sender. At 10:41 a.m., new data rolled in from the Chilean array. The signal wasn't steady anymore. It was rising. The amplitude doubled, then tripled, then stabilized at a higher energy level, like something increasing its power output to maintain clarity across a widening distance. Atlas was accelerating again,
and broadcasting louder. "We need to shut down exposure," the director warned. "What if this is hostile?" No one said it out loud, but we all knew what he meant. A signal can carry information, but it can also carry energy. Energy concentrated can become a weapon. Emily's voice crackled through the speaker. "If we shut down now, we lose the only chance to understand what Atlas is." "I'm aware," the director said through clenched teeth. Caldwell's hands hovered over his keyboard, trembling. "We can isolate portions, decode partially, safely." "Safely?" the director snapped. "Define safely." No one did, because none of us were sure anything was safe anymore. At 11:03 a.m., the signal shifted. Not in power, not in frequency, in structure. The pulses slowed, then stabilized with a precision so sharp it felt like geometry made of sound. I stared at the graph, feeling the world tilt in a way that had nothing to do with gravity. "It's repeating," I whispered. Caldwell nodded slowly. "Almost like it wants us to understand." The director frowned. "Why slow down?" "To make sure we catch it," I said before thinking. He turned to me. "Explain." I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. "If the pattern was too fast for us to decode, and it slowed down, then either it adapted, or—"
I used to think the most terrifying moment in a scientist's life was realizing you'd made a mistake that broke your entire model. I was wrong. The most terrifying moment is realizing you didn't make a mistake. The data really is that bad. Reality really is that wrong. The thing inside 3I-AT Atlas, the small, dense core we had spotted warming inside that cylindrical pocket, wasn't a rock, wasn't a fragment, wasn't some leftover chunk of primordial ice. It was a device. We didn't have a better word for it. We still don't. And the truth was setting in like a slow bleed. Atlas wasn't a comet hiding a machine. Atlas was the machine. What we'd been tracking for months wasn't a natural object with something artificial embedded in it. It was an engineered shell surrounding a smaller, more important component. A delivery system, a casing, a vessel, maybe even a weapon. The moment we understood that, really understood it, something shifted inside the room. Hope didn't vanish. It inverted, turned into a darker, metallic shape. Something like inevitability. At 12:21 p.m., Emily's newest data packet arrived, and when Caldwell opened it, the air in the lab thinned. No one breathed. The hotspot around the inner cylinder had tripled in brightness. The heat pattern was symmetrical, controlled, structured, not chaotic like a meltdown, not explosive like outgassing. It was regimented. Energy was being routed purposefully to a single central chamber. "We're witnessing activation," Caldwell whispered. The director didn't yell, didn't panic, didn't break. He just closed his eyes and said, "Dear God." He wasn't praying. It sounded more like surrender. The next seismic shift came from the spectral data, something we had overlooked until now because the numbers seemed too absurd to consider seriously. But nothing
was absurd anymore. Look at the absorption lines. Caldwell pulled up a new graph. They're narrow, too narrow, as if the material inside, which was heating, was absorbing specific wavelengths with razor precision. This doesn't match any known mineralogical profile, I said. Not even exotic ices, Emily echoed over the line. This is engineered. Then she added something that made the room feel suddenly small. Someone built this to survive long-duration interstellar travel and to activate only under the right conditions. What conditions? The director asked. Emily hesitated. Proximity to a star, a warm-up threshold, maybe tidal forces, maybe sunlight intensity. Something inside Atlas woke up because it reached a trigger point. This was planned? Scripted? It looks that way. A chill moved through me like a migrating shadow. If the device was programmed to wake up in a star system, then it was meant to reach a star system, which meant something launched it, something deployed it, something sent it, and now it was finishing its instructions. At 12:47 p.m., the internal chamber brightened again, not exponentially this time, logarithmically, like a countdown, not in numbers, in heat, in energy levels. The lab's radiometric display glowed red. Caldwell spoke first. It's charging faster. Look at the slope. The core? I whispered. No, the shell. I stared at the screen. You mean Atlas itself? Yes, he said. The entire outer body is absorbing and rerouting energy to the central unit. The director turned slowly. Like a booster, he said. I nodded. It's a delivery mechanism. Delivery of what? He demanded. We don't know yet. But deep down, I knew. Maybe not the specifics, maybe not the payload, but the shape of the truth was forming. Atlas wasn't meant to hit Venus, not as a dumb rock, not as a projectile. It was meant to arrive there. Intact? Partially? Long enough to deploy whatever was inside? I didn't know, but the path made sense now. The acceleration, the corrections, the chamber heating, the second object inside, the signal to Earth. None of it was random. Atlas was a shell, and the shell was preparing to open. At 1:33 p.m., the Pentagon sent a new directive. It wasn't a request. It was an instruction. Transmit a response. I stared at the message like it was a loaded gun. You want us to talk to it? The director said incredulously. We need to know intention, and we need to know if it understands us, the Pentagon liaison replied. Caldwell rubbed his face. What the hell do you want us to say? Something neutral, the liaison said. Something universal. Start with mathematical constants, prime numbers, geometric patterns. And if it answers, I asked quietly. The liaison didn't hesitate. Then we'll know it's listening. I felt my pulse in my throat. And if it doesn't? Then nothing changes. But something would change. Everything would change. Because either the object would respond, or it would ignore us. And both possibilities were equally terrifying. We composed the transmission carefully. Prime sequences, ratios, simple binary patterns, a greeting humans have dreamed of sending for a century. When the director nodded, Caldwell hit send. The signal left Earth, passed through our sky, fanned into space, and raced toward Atlas at the speed of light. It would reach the object in just under 9 minutes. Those 9 minutes felt like someone stretching my spine with hooks. Every monitor was silent, every person still. The world outside didn't exist. We waited. 8 minutes, then 8.5, then 8:40. My heartbeat was in my teeth. At 8 minutes 51 seconds, Atlas responded. Instant, precise, as if it had been waiting. The signal hit our receivers like a slap of cold metal. High bandwidth, high coherence, a 3-block pattern structure. The first block was identical to ours, mirrored back. Acknowledge. The second block was new, dense, layered, algorithmic, meaning. The third block was something none of us expected. A set of numbers, 4 of them. Emily gasped. "Oh, God, those are coordinates." Caldwell's hands trembled. "They're giving us a location?" The director leaned in. "No," he said, "not a location." His eyes widened. "They're time." I stared. He was right. The numbers weren't coordinates in space. They were coordinates in time. A timestamp, aligned with the impact window, corresponding exactly to the moment Atlas would reach Venus. The message had a scheduled endpoint. Atlas was telling us, this ends at Venus. But why tell us? Why send anything at all? Why acknowledge us? It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like an instruction, a protocol, a requirement. Like it needed us to know, needed us to witness, or needed us to react. At 1:32 p.m., a new image came in, and everything in me froze. The shell, Atlas itself, was cracking, not exploding, not failing, opening. A long, hairline fissure had appeared along the equator of the comet.
I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. Not because we didn't want to, because sleep requires the illusion of safety. And by the time Atlas began to open, safety had become a memory, something soft-edged and distant, like childhood. The seam along Atlas's equator widened hour by hour, a perfect mechanical separation, the kind you see in spacecraft, not comets. By dawn, it wasn't just a fissure, it was a mouth, a yawning, symmetrical aperture revealing layers beneath the ice, struts, ribs, engineered lattices designed to peel apart under controlled stress. Every natural assumption we'd ever made about interstellar visitors dissolved beneath that seam. Atlas wasn't an intruder, it was a container. And the container was in its final stage of deployment. By 9:14 a.m., we had a full cross-section model. The shell was estimated to separate completely in less than 15 days, well before impact, which meant the object inside wouldn't arrive buried in ice. It would arrive naked, exposed, operational. We still didn't know what it was, but we knew what it wasn't. It wasn't a rock. It wasn't debris. It wasn't a geological shard from some dead star system. The internal unit, the core, was smooth, dense, perfectly ovoid, with no identifiable seams, no apparent thrusters, and no visible sensors. Like a seed built by hands that understood materials we couldn't name. Caldwell stared at the model like it was an artifact from a nightmare. "What does something like that do?" he whispered. "Deploy," Emily said over the line. "It deploys. That's its purpose." Deploy what? We didn't know. Not yet. At 12:47 p.m., the signal changed again. Not the amplitude, not the frequency, the content. It began transmitting a new pattern, long, layered, almost musical. Not music in the human sense, but structure with rhythm, cadence, progression. A message that felt less like information and more like a cycle, repeating, evolving, growing clearer the closer Atlas got to Venus. "This isn't for us," I said quietly. Caldwell blinked. "What do you mean?" "It's not aimed at Earth anymore. Look at the vector, the correction, the Doppler shift." I zoomed in. The signal wasn't hitting Earth dead on. It was skimming us. A side effect. Collateral illumination. The real target lie ahead. Venus. Emily's voice came through, thin and shaken. "Oh God, it's calling to the planet." "What?" the director asked. She didn't answer. None of us did. The question was too big. At 2:02 p.m., the president convened an emergency meeting. Not through secure line, in person. She walked into the operations room like someone carrying a boulder on her shoulders, eyes red, voice scraped thin. She said, "Tell me the truth. All of it." The room held its breath. Caldwell spoke softly, as if afraid the wrong volume might provoke the heavens. "The shell will open fully in about 15 days. And the core? We believe it's designed to survive atmospheric entry, possibly to activate once it reaches the surface, or orbit, or pressure threshold." I added, "Venus's environment might not be a problem. It might be the requirement." The president's face tightened. "So this thing is meant for Venus?" "Yes," I said. "Everything suggests intention, precision, purpose." She inhaled slowly. "Is there anything we can do?" Silence. Across the world's most advanced scientific center, silence spread like frost. The director looked at her, not as an employee, not as a citizen, but as a human being standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. He said, "No," quietly. "Not with our current technology." "Then we wait?" "We observe," he said, "and prepare for what comes next." The president nodded. Then she did something I'll never forget. She sat down. Not because she was tired, but because the weight of the unknown finally forced her to. At 4:18 p.m., Emily sent the image that changed everything. The core, the inner device, was glowing. Not thermal glow, not incandescent, not heat dissipation. A structured glow. Bands of light running across its surface in precise intervals, like activation layers cycling online. And at the center of those bands, pulsing slowly, was a symbol. Not language, not anything we recognized. A geometric configuration that repeated every 6 seconds, every rotation, every power cycle. Caldwell whispered, "It's a protocol mark." Emily agreed, "An activation signature." The director leaned over my shoulder. "What does that mean?" The answer landed in my mind like a falling blade. "It means," I said, "that whatever's inside Atlas isn't waking up randomly." Caldwell swallowed. "Then what's triggering it?" I looked at the trajectory, the countdown. The signal pointed at Venus. And then I understood. "The planet," I said. "Venus is the trigger." The director stiffened. "You're telling me this thing is meant to activate on Venus?" "Yes," I said quietly.
Everything is guiding it there. But why Venus? Why that planet? Why indeed? A dead world, crushed under 90 atmospheres of pressure, hotter than molten lead, covered in clouds of sulfuric acid, a planet where nothing human could stand for more than seconds. A planet perfect for something else, something built differently, something not like us. The next twist came at 5:07 p.m. The signal we thought was a countdown. It shifted, suddenly, sharply, as if responding to something we hadn't done or something Atlas had detected. The pulses changed cadence, not shorter, not faster, more complex, layered, like the message was evolving. Caldwell stared, horrified. Oh no, 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 no. This isn't a countdown. The director snapped. Then what is it? Caldwell pointed at the waveform. It's telemetry. I felt my breath catch. Telemetry of what? I whispered. Caldwell's face drained. The core. It's transmitting a self-diagnostic. Emily broke in. I'm seeing it too. It's alive, not biological, mechanical. System checks, energy levels, stabilizers, interface pathways. Interface, the director repeated. Interface with what? She hesitated. The host. The host, I echoed. Venus? No, she said softly, and then with absolute dread, whatever's on Venus or whatever's under Venus. Silence. A suffocating silence. Because that meant one thing. Atlas wasn't delivering something new. Atlas was coming to wake something old. The spiral of tension tightened, the data accelerated, the world shrank to screens and numbers and a signal singing through our system like a mechanical hymn. At 6:49 p.m., we saw the first tremor, a low subharmonic pulse inside the core, like a heartbeat. Not random, not chaotic, a steady two-beat cycle. Thrum, thrum, thrum. Caldwell whispered, voice cracking. It's alive. I said, no, not alive, active. But I wasn't sure I believed my own correction. Then the fissures on the Atlas shell widened like opening flower petals, revealing more of the structure inside. Metal. Not any metal we knew. Alloyed, dark, smooth as obsidian, but with interference patterns that moved across its surface like oil on water. Designed to survive impossible speeds, impossible cold, impossible time. The core pulsed again, louder. The signal shifted a third time. Emily screamed into the mic, It's linking to something on Venus!